My name is Scarlett Brown, and I'm 18 years old. If you'd told me a week ago that my 18th birthday would end with my own mother threatening to throw me out of the house, I'd have laughed. But that's exactly what happened. The day started quietly, almost eerily so. No cake, no happy birthday, not even a text from Mom that morning. I remember walking into the kitchen, the air thick with the smell of burnt toast and coffee. My mother Diane sat at the counter, scrolling through her phone, perfectly manicured nails tapping against the screen. My stepdad Paul was lacing up his shoes for work. Across the room, Susan, my 15-year-old stepsister and self-proclaimed princess, was smirking at me, like she already knew something I didn't. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual. Diane didn't look up. "We need to talk later," she said flatly. No happy birthday, no smile. Just that. Paul mumbled something about being late and slipped out. Susan blew a bubble with her gum and let it pop right in my direction. I tried not to show it, but my stomach sank. Later that afternoon, when the house was finally quiet, my mother called me to the living room. Her tone was soft, too soft. The kind of softness that means danger. She gestured to the couch. "Sit down, Scarlett. We need to discuss your future." Something about the way she said your future made me uneasy. Still, I sat trying to brace myself. She folded her arms. "You're 18 now, an adult. It's time you start contributing to this household." I frowned. "I already help. I pay for my own stuff. I even buy groceries when you ask." "I'm not talking about that," she interrupted, her voice sharp. "Paul and I have decided to start saving for Susan's college tuition. Since you got a sports scholarship, you won't have those expenses. So we expect you to pitch in for her fund." For a second, I thought I misheard. "You want me to pay for Susan's college?" "Yes." She said it like it was obvious. "You're part of this family, Scarlett. We all help each other." I stared at her. The words hit like a slap. "You mean I either give money for her or I have to move out?" Diane leaned back, sighing dramatically. "If you're not willing to be responsible, maybe it's time you learn what independence really means." There it was, the ultimatum. No hesitation, no empathy. The room spun a little. I thought of the years I'd spent trying to earn even a fraction of her approval. The late nights playing lacrosse until my muscles screamed, hoping she'd show up to one game. She never did. Susan could just smile and get a new dress while I had to win championships just to be noticed. "Mom," I said slowly, "you and Paul both work at a hospital. You make enough to pay for her college. Why are you asking me?" Her lips curled into a thin smile. "Because this is how families work, Scarlett. You contribute or you leave." I wanted to scream, but all I managed was a hollow whisper. "You're really choosing her over me again, aren't you?" Diane's eyes flickered with irritation. "Don't make this about jealousy. Susan never talks back the way you do. Maybe you should learn from her." That stung. Not because it was new, but because it was expected. It was always Susan's good grades, Susan's smile, Susan's future. I tried to breathe evenly. "Fine," I said quietly. "Can you repeat what you just said about the college fund?" Her brows furrowed. "Why? I just want to make sure I understand." So she repeated it, every word. I subtly tapped my phone's screen in my pocket, starting the recorder. Her tone grew harsher as she spoke, accusing me of selfishness, of being ungrateful for everything she'd done. When she was finished, I looked at her, forcing a small smile. "Okay, I'll think about it." She looked satisfied. "Good. You'll make the right choice." As I walked back to my room, I shut the door quietly and locked it. The air felt heavy. I sat on my bed, staring at the tiny red light blinking on my phone screen. That recording those exact words felt like the only proof I had that I wasn't going crazy. I stared out the window at the evening sky, turning orange, hearing Susan laugh downstairs. The same girl who'd once cut up my lacrosse uniform and blamed the dog. I knew my mother wouldn't change. I also knew that arguing would only make her dig her heels in deeper. But there was one person she would listen to, one person she feared disappointing more than anyone else. My grandparents. They were the only people who'd ever made me feel loved, without conditions. But Mom rarely let me visit them, claiming they were too old and that I exhausted them. The truth was simpler. She didn't want them to know what kind of person she'd become. I scrolled through my phone and looked at Grandma Marion's contact. I hadn't called her in months. My thumb hovered over the button, my heart pounding. Then, almost without thinking, I pressed call. Her familiar, warm voice answered on the second ring. "Scarlett, sweetheart." Oh my goodness, it's been ages. My throat tightened. "Hi, Grandma. Can I come over? I really need to talk to you." She hesitated only for a moment. "Of course, darling. Come now." I exhaled shakily. For the first time that day, I felt like I could breathe. As I slipped my phone and the hidden recording into my jacket pocket, One thought pulsed through my mind. If my mother wouldn't listen to reason, maybe she'd listen to them. And if she didn't, then for once in my life, I'd make sure someone else finally saw her for who she really was. The street to my grandparents' house was only a few blocks away, but that evening, it felt like crossing a line I could never return from. Every step made my heart pound harder, not from fear, but from a strange mixture of guilt and relief. Grandma Marion opened the door before I even knocked. She looked exactly the same as I remembered. Silver hair in a neat bun, a soft cardigan that smelled faintly of lavender. Her smile trembled when she saw me. "Scarlett," she whispered, pulling me into her arms. "It's been too long." I hadn't realized how badly I needed that hug until then. The moment her arms wrapped around me, I nearly broke down. Grandpa Harold was in his recliner reading the newspaper. He adjusted his glasses, surprised. "Well, look who the cat dragged in." "Finally got tired of your mother's rules," I managed a weak laugh. Something like that. They ushered me inside. Their house felt like another world compared to home. Warm lighting, framed photos of my late father smiling proudly in his college lacrosse uniform, and the faint hum of old jazz playing from the kitchen. Every corner whispered familiarity and peace. We sat in the living room, and Grandma poured me tea before I even asked. Now, she said gently, "Tell us what's wrong." I tried to stay calm, but the words came tumbling out messy and tear-soaked. I told them about the birthday that wasn't really a birthday, about Mom's ultimatum, about Susan's smug face at the breakfast table. I even played them the recording. When my mother's cold voice filled the room, "You either pay for Susan's college or move out." Grandma's teacup clinked sharply against its saucer. She said that she breathed trembling to her own daughter. Grandpa's face darkened. "She's lost her mind." I wiped my eyes. I didn't know what else to do. I thought maybe if you talked to her, she'd listen. He leaned forward. "Did she actually say she'd kick you out?" I nodded, pressing my lips together. "If I don't contribute, I'm not welcome." Grandpa slammed the newspaper onto the table. "Not welcome in a house that I paid for." The nerve. Harold, Grandma warned softly, though her own hands were trembling. Let her finish. I hesitated, then confessed the rest, the favoritism, the years of being overlooked, how Susan could do no wrong, while I could never be enough. The words spilled faster, my throat burning, as I admitted the one thing I'd never said out loud. She took the mother I was supposed to have. Silence. Then Grandma reached out, her eyes glassy. "Oh, sweetheart, she was wrong. She's been wrong for a long time." I looked between them, afraid. I shouldn't have come. I didn't know who else to talk to. Grandpa rose slowly from his chair. "You did the right thing." His voice was calm, but his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, were blazing. "Your mother's forgotten who she is, and it's time someone reminded her." I blinked. "Grandpa, please don't start a fight because of me." "It's not a fight," he interrupted. "It's a reckoning." He disappeared into his study for a moment. When he returned, he was holding a thick folder, the deed to the house. "She's been living under my roof on my good faith," he said, tapping the folder. "That house was a wedding gift, but the title's still in my name. I thought about transferring it years ago, but something always stopped me. Now I see why." "Harold!" Grandma's voice trembled. He looked at her, then at me. "Marion, if she wants to kick our granddaughter out, maybe she should be the one to leave." The room went still. I stood abruptly. "No, Grandpa." "I didn't come here to make things worse. I just wanted to be heard," he said quietly. "Well, you will be." Grandma took my hand, her touch gentle but firm. "Don't worry about us, Scarlett. You just go enjoy your birthday the way you deserve. We'll handle the rest." "I can't let you—" She smiled sadly. "You can, darling. Because this isn't about revenge. It's about justice." Her words hung in the air like a quiet storm. Grandpa pressed a $100 bill into my palm. "Go celebrate with your friends. You've got nothing to be ashamed of." I wanted to protest, but my voice cracked. "Thank you for believing me." Grandpa gave me a look I couldn't quite read, part fierce, part sorrowful. "Your mother used to be kind, you know. I don't know what happened after your father passed, but she became someone I barely recognize. Maybe losing her comfort will make her remember her heart." I didn't know what to say. I just hugged them both before stepping outside. The evening air felt different, thicker, humming with something I couldn't name. As I walked away, I glanced back once. Through the window, I saw Grandpa picking up the phone, his jaw set. Grandma stood behind him, one hand on his shoulder, her face pale but resolute. And in that fleeting glimpse, I knew something had already been set in motion, something that couldn't be undone. I walked faster, clutching the money in my pocket, whispering to myself like a promise. They'll make her listen this time. But even then, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered back, And what if they go too far? That night, the city lights blurred through the window of the diner where my friends had dragged me. They were laughing, passing me a slice of cake with a candle in it, but I barely heard them. My phone lay on the table beside the milkshake screen, dark waiting. When I finally glanced down, I saw a message from Grandma Marion. Stay at our house tonight. Don't go home. No explanation, no emoji, just that. Something twisted in my chest. I stared at those words for a long moment, my pulse racing. Had they already called Mom? What had she said? I excused myself from the table and stepped outside into the cool night air. The parking lot buzzed with neon light and distant laughter, but inside my head there was only silence and dread. I tried calling Grandma, but she didn't answer. Neither did Grandpa. Whatever was happening, it was happening now. Hours later, I stood on their front porch again, a little past 10. The door opened before I could knock. Grandpa looked different. Not angry. Not relieved. Just heavy, as if the night had aged him 10 years. He didn't speak at first, just gestured for me to come inside. Grandma was sitting on the couch, her hands clasped tightly, eyes red. Grandpa, I began what happened. He sighed deeply and sank into the armchair. We called your mother. The words hit like a cold slap. I told her, he continued, that what she did was unacceptable, that no child deserves to be threatened like that. I tried to be calm. I really did. Grandma reached for my hand, but she wouldn't listen. I swallowed hard. What did she say? Grandpa leaned forward, his voice trembling with anger and disbelief. She said you were just being dramatic, that you twisted her words. She even said I was interfering in her parenting. My stomach turned. Of course she did. He nodded bitterly. Then I reminded her that the house she lives in isn't hers. It's still in my name. I told her she could either apologize to you and make things right, or she could start looking for somewhere else to live. I froze. Grandpa, you didn't. I did, he said firmly. And she laughed Scarlett, said she didn't care, said she and Paul would move out by the end of the week if that's what I wanted. For a second, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the old clock on the wall. Grandma wiped her eyes. She called me selfish, said I always favored you, that I'm the reason she had to be the strong one. She said that I whispered. She did, Grandma said softly, and then she hung up. The silence that followed was suffocating. Grandpa's hands trembled slightly as he rubbed his temples. I never thought I'd hear my own daughter talk to me like that. Not Diane. I didn't know whether to cry or apologize or just disappear. Grandpa, I didn't mean to start all this. I just wanted her to stop. He shook his head. You didn't start anything. She did. Years ago. We just refused to see it. Grandma looked up suddenly, her eyes fierce through her tears. We can't let her take everything from you, Scarlett. Not your dignity, not your home. She's crossed too many lines. I swallowed the lump in my throat. So what happens now? Grandpa's voice was quiet but absolute. We're transferring the deed to you. What? He met my eyes. The house is legally mine, always has been. Tomorrow morning I'll sign it over to you. Let Diane find her own place. Maybe then she'll understand the weight of her choices. My heart pounded. Grandpa, I can't. This is too much. I don't want her to hate me. He gave a sad smile. She already does, sweetheart. But maybe losing what she took for granted will make her remember who gave it to her in the first place. I felt dizzy, torn between shock and sorrow. But she's still your daughter. He nodded. And you're my granddaughter. One who's been treated like a stranger in her own home. It's time someone stood up for you. Grandma squeezed my hand. We'll handle the paperwork tomorrow. Tonight you rest. You've had enough pain for one birthday. I sat there for a long time after they went to bed, staring at the flickering shadows on the living room wall. My mind kept replaying my mother's voice, the way she'd said, you contribute or you leave. Now she was the one being asked to leave. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt safe. But all I felt was hollow. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting the room in pale gold. Grandpa was already dressed. A folder under his arm. I called the lawyer, he said. He's expecting us at 11. Everything moved too fast after that. The legal forms, the quiet tension, the lawyer's solemn nod. By noon, it was official. The house that had once been my mother's fortress was now mine. That evening, I sat by the window at my grandparents' place, staring at the sky, turning crimson. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from Mom. Don't bother coming home. You've made your choice. No punctuation, no warmth. I read it 3 times before locking the screen. My chest felt tight, but there was also something else, a strange, quiet relief. I hadn't just broken her rule tonight. I'd broken the entire system she built to control me. Still, as I sat there listening to the crickets outside, one thought echoed louder than the rest. If she's capable of cutting me off this easily, What else is she capable of losing? By the next morning, it was all over the neighborhood. Mrs. Pierce, our next-door neighbor, texted me out of nowhere. "Your mom's moving. What happened, sweetheart?" I didn't reply. I couldn't. How was I supposed to explain that my own mother had chosen pride over her daughter? Grandpa had gone to the old house earlier that day to speak with her in person. He told me to stay put, that he'd handle it. But as the hours dragged by, my anxiety grew heavier, so I decided to go just to grab my things, nothing more. When I arrived, the driveway was packed. Mom's car, Paul's sedan, and Susan's pink bicycle all lined up like nothing had changed, except everything had. I hesitated at the front door, the key trembling in my hand. For a moment, I almost knocked out of old habit. Then I realized I didn't need permission anymore. I turned the knob and stepped inside. The house felt wrong. The air thick, the walls echoing with an emptiness that hadn't been there before. Family portraits were gone from the hallway, probably packed up already. The smell of lemon cleaner lingered in the air, sharp and cold. My steps echoed as I made my way toward my room, but halfway down the hall, a voice stopped me. "Scarlett." I froze, my mother's voice. She stood at the end of the hallway, hair pulled back messily, dark circles beneath her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she didn't look composed. She looked human. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I almost said no, but something in her tone, fragile and certain, made me nod. We stepped into my room, the same room she'd once threatened to take away from me. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she started. "I didn't mean for things to go this far," she said. "You blindsided me, Scarlett. You didn't even give me a chance to explain." "Explain what I asked. That you were going to kick me out unless I paid for Susan's college." She exhaled shakily. "That wasn't what I meant. You misunderstood me." I laughed bitter and sharp. "I recorded you, Mom. I didn't misunderstand anything." Her eyes flashed for a second, but she caught herself. "I was only trying to teach you responsibility," she said softly. "That money, it wasn't really for Susan. I was going to put it into a savings account for you, for your future." I stared at her, my pulse hammering. "You expect me to believe that?" She took a step closer. "If you'd just trusted me, if you hadn't run to your grandparents, none of this would have happened. They've humiliated me, Scarlett. Do you understand that my own father kicked me out of the house I've lived in for 20 years? Her voice cracked, and for a second I saw something raw beneath the anger, fear, shame, maybe even regret. "Mom," I said quietly, "you told me I wasn't welcome here. You made me choose between helping Susan or leaving. What did you expect me to do?" "I expected you to talk to me," she cried, her voice rising, "not to go behind my back and make me look like some kind of monster to my parents." I felt the sting of tears. "You are their daughter, Mom, but you're also mine, and you haven't acted like it in years." She flinched, her mouth trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Scarlett. I didn't know how to handle losing your father. You look so much like him, and every time I saw you, it reminded me of what I'd lost. So when Paul came along, when Susan came along, it felt like a fresh start, something new, something safe." The confession hit me harder than I expected. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. All those years of being compared, ignored, replaced. It wasn't about me. It was about her grief. But knowing that didn't erase the pain. "So you punish me," I whispered, "for reminding you of Dad." She didn't deny it. Her silence said enough. Tears blurred my vision. "You could have chosen to love me anyway. You didn't." "I'm trying now," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, Scarlett, tell your grandparents I didn't mean it. Tell them we can work this out. I'll fix everything." I stared at her, my mother standing in my doorway, begging for the house she'd once used to control me. "Grandpa's already made up his mind," I said. "The house is mine now." Her expression hardened instantly. "You think that makes you better than me? You think that house will make you happy?" "No," I said softly, "but at least it's honest." For a long moment, she just looked at me. Then her tears vanished as quickly as they'd come, replaced by that cold, familiar stare. "You'll regret this," she said. "You always do." She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there shaking, surrounded by half-packed boxes and memories I didn't want. Outside, I could hear Susan arguing with Grandpa on the porch, her high-pitched voice full of entitlement. "It's not fair. It's our house." But it wasn't. Not anymore. As I picked up my duffel bag, I realized something I'd never dared admit before. I wasn't angry at my mother for choosing Susan. I was angry at myself for believing she'd ever choose me. I took one last look around the room, the trophies, the fading posters, the cracked mirror, and whispered goodbye. Then I walked out, not just from the house, but from the version of myself that had always been waiting for her love. 2 days later, the sound of tires crunching on the driveway pulled me out of sleep. I looked out from my grandparents' window just in time to see my mother's SUV parked crookedly by the curb. The engine idled for a moment before she turned it off. I could already feel the tension thickening the morning air. Harold, Grandma murmured from the kitchen, she's here. Grandpa folded his newspaper, slowly slid on his glasses, and muttered, let's get this over with. I didn't want to go downstairs, but part of me knew I had to. This was the final chapter of something that had been festering for years. When I walked out onto the porch, Diane was standing in the yard, clutching a ring of keys. Her face was pale, jaw tight. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked hollow. Paul stood a few feet behind her arms, crossed while Susan scrolled on her phone, pretending none of it was happening. Here, Mom said curtly, holding out the keys. I suppose these belong to you now. I didn't reach for them immediately. You don't have to. Yes, I do, she snapped, then took a shaky breath. Your grandfather made it very clear. We're leaving today. Grandpa joined me on the porch. Diane, you made your choices. This didn't have to happen. She turned on him. You humiliated me in front of my husband, my daughter, our neighbors. Do you have any idea what people are saying about me? Grandpa's face didn't change. They're probably saying a parent shouldn't threaten to kick their child out. If that embarrasses you, that's not my fault. The words hung in the air like gunfire. For a moment, I thought she might break down or shout or beg again. Instead, she just gave a hollow laugh. You always sided with her, even when she lied about me. I stepped forward, voice shaking. I didn't lie, Mom. I just stopped pretending. That hit her. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Paul placed a hand on her shoulder. Diane, let's go. She didn't move. Her eyes locked on mine, something raw and hateful flickering beneath the surface. You think this makes you an adult? Owning a house doesn't make you grown up, Scarlett. Losing your family does. I swallowed hard. You can't lose something you never really had. Her lip trembled, but she said nothing. She simply dropped the keys on the porch railing with a metallic clang and walked to the car. Susan followed, glaring at me as she passed. You ruined everything, she hissed. Maybe I did, but for once I didn't feel sorry. They drove off a moment later, their car shrinking down the street until it disappeared around the corner. Grandpa let out a long breath. Grandma touched my shoulder gently. You okay, sweetheart? I nodded, though my eyes burned. It's over. But it didn't feel over. It felt like the world had gone quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful, just empty. Later that afternoon, we went to the lawyer's office for the final papers. The deed was signed in my name now, Scarlett Brown, owner. The black ink felt surreal beneath my fingertips. This isn't just about property, Grandpa said softly as we walked back to the car. It's about reclaiming what's yours. But in the silence that followed, I found myself whispering, what if I took too much from her? He looked at me with tired, kind eyes. No, Scarlett, you didn't take anything. You simply stopped letting her take from you. That evening, I returned to the house for the first time as its owner. The front door creaked open, the faint smell of my mother's perfume still clinging to the walls. The rooms looked bigger now, stripped bare of her furniture and presence. My footsteps echoed as I walked through each room. The living room where she used to scold me, the kitchen, where I'd eaten countless silent dinners, my old bedroom that still had faint outlines where my posters used to hang. For the first time, I realized how small I had always felt here. I sat on the floor for a long time, knees pulled to my chest, listening to the wind against the window panes. Somewhere between grief and relief, tears came quietly, not from sadness, but from the exhaustion of finally being free. When I finally stepped outside, Grandpa was waiting by the gate. He looked at me the way fathers look at daughters they're proud of, without words. Just quiet understanding. She's gone, I said softly. He nodded. And now you can live. I took a deep breath of the evening air. The sky was glowing orange the way it had on my birthday, but it didn't feel suffocating anymore. As we locked up, I looked down at the keys in my hand, cool metal pressing into my skin, and thought of my mother's parting words. You'll regret this. Maybe she was right. Maybe there would always be a part of me that wondered if things could have been different. But for now, all I could feel was a fragile, trembling kind of peace, the kind that comes only after surviving a storm. It's been 2 weeks since my mother left. The house is quiet now, peaceful, in a way that almost feels strange. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind through the curtains reminds me that for the first time in my life, this space truly belongs to me. Grandma and Grandpa moved in a few days ago, bringing with them the warmth I never realized I'd been missing. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifts through the halls in the mornings. Laughter echoes from the kitchen again. There are flowers on the dining table instead of tension in the air. It doesn't feel like the same house anymore. Last night, I walked through the empty upstairs hallway, the same one where my mother once stood and told me I didn't belong. I stopped at the door of her old bedroom. The walls were bare now, a few nails still sticking out where framed pictures had hung. I stood there for a long time, wondering if she missed this place. Or me. Maybe both, maybe neither. When Grandpa joined me, he didn't say anything at first. He just placed a hand on my shoulder. "She'll come around someday," he said quietly. "Will she?" He sighed. "I don't know. But even if she doesn't, that's her journey, not yours." We stood there in silence for a moment. Then he smiled faintly. "You know, your dad helped me build that porch railing out back. He must have been about your age. Stubborn as hell, just like you." That made me laugh, really laugh, for the first time in weeks. The next morning, I sat on that same porch with a mug of coffee, watching the sunrise. My laptop was open on the small table beside me, a half-finished scholarship essay blinking on the screen. In a few months, I'd be heading to college on my lacrosse scholarship, a new town, a new start. But for now, this was enough. As I typed, I found myself writing about everything that had happened, not the drama or the anger, but the truth underneath it all. How sometimes family isn't the people who share your blood, but the ones who stay when everything else falls apart. How love, real love, never demands payment. I didn't realize until later that I was crying while I wrote. Not because I was sad, but because I finally understood that this peace, this quiet, was the thing I'd been fighting for all along. That afternoon, Grandma called from the living room. "Mail's here, sweetheart." She handed me an envelope with my name on it, in an unfamiliar handwriting. I froze when I saw the return address. It was my mother's. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a short letter. "Scarlett, I don't know how to talk to you anymore, so I'm writing instead. Maybe I said things I can't take back. Maybe I meant some of them in the moment, but not the way they sounded. Losing that house, it wasn't about the walls or the money. It was about realizing how easily I lost you. I hope you're happy there. You deserve to be. Mom!" There was no apology, no excuses, but for once there was honesty. I folded the letter carefully and set it aside. I didn't know whether to cry forgive her or both. Maybe forgiveness wasn't a single act. Maybe it was something you did little by little, every time you chose peace over resentment. That night, Grandma made dinner roast chicken and mashed potatoes just like she used to when I was a kid. We sat around the table, the three of us, laughter weaving through the air, where shouting used to live. Afterward, Grandpa handed me a small box. Inside was a single silver key attached to a leather tag engraved with my initials. He smiled. "Every home needs a guardian. Now this one has you." I ran my thumb over the initials. The weight of it was more than metal. It was legacy and love and the end of fear. Later, lying in bed, I scrolled through old photos on my phone. One caught my eye, a picture of me at age 7, sitting on Dad's shoulders, both of us laughing. The sunlight behind us looked exactly like the one I saw through my window now. For the first time in a long while, I whispered a prayer, not for revenge, not for justice, but for healing. For my mom, for Susan even, for the parts of myself that still ached. Because maybe this story wasn't about who lost what. Maybe it was about who finally learned to let go. When I turned off the light, the house settled around me with a soft sigh. This home, my home, no longer echoed with commands or criticism. It breathed with warmth, with the quiet hum of forgiveness beginning to take root. I thought of my mother's last words. "You'll regret this," and smiled to myself in the dark. No, I wouldn't, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't living to please someone else. I was living to be free. This house used to echo with demands I whispered. Now it breathes with my own choices.